And then we came in on the starboard side of beam of the bridge. And the first thing I saw coming out of the gloom at 30 feet was this giant wall of riveted steel that rose over 100 and some feet above us.
20 years after the last great expedition, a team of scientists returned to the Titanic, a monument to human ambition. Now fading into myth, they expected decay. After all, the ocean had been feeding on the wreck for more than a century, but as their submersibles sank through the cold darkness, what appeared on their monitors was different.
And as we rose up after that first dive that lasted just minutes, we began to see the portholes. And it was like people looking back at us. It was pretty haunting, actually.
The Titanic had changed. It no longer looked like decay. It looked like design, as if something, or someone, was rebuilding what time had already claimed, where time had once left its scars, twisted beams, peeling steel, and ruin now. Across the hull, strange geometric shapes had begun to emerge, and in the stillness of the deep, one haunting question remained. What or who could awaken a ship that had slept for more than 100 years and make it change? And as the team pushed deeper into the wreck, they realized the Titanic wasn't the only thing down there. The submersible drifted silently over the Titanic's resting place, its cameras sweeping across layers of fine sediment that had settled over the wreck like dust on a forgotten tomb. Then something unusual appeared on the monitor's long, linear grooves etched deep into the ocean floor, stretching far beyond the known debris field. At first, no one thought much of it. The team assumed the marks were natural, the work of shifting currents, or perhaps the remains of old survey tracks from earlier expeditions. But when the footage was enhanced and magnified, a quiet unease crept through the control room. The lines were too clean, too perfect. Their depth uniform to the millimeter looked more engineered than eroded. Someone finally broke the silence, suggesting they might be wheel tracks or drag marks left by some kind of machine. The idea was quickly dismissed. Nothing humans had ever built could operate at such pressure, let alone leave prints so pristine that the Atlantic's currents hadn't erased them. Theories followed from giant sea creatures to geological shifts, but none fit. The grooves ran for hundreds of meters, perfectly parallel, curving with a precision that defied nature. They didn't look accidental. They looked intentional. Then the sonar began to return distorted readings. Small pockets of interference clustered along the same path as the grooves. It hinted at something metallic buried beneath the sediment. The pilot adjusted course and eased the submersible closer. As the floodlights cut through the black water, the cameras locked onto a shape rising from the sand. Half buried lay a massive metallic block, smooth, angular, and impossibly intact. It wasn't part of the Titanic. Its surface was polished, untouched by rust, gleaming faintly under the lights like it had been waiting there. The crew stared, wordless. No one knew what it was or how it had come to rest beside the wreck. But as they followed the grooves back across the seabed, one realization took hold. The tracks led directly from the object toward the Titanic, as if something had once moved between them. And whatever had done it might not be gone. In the days that followed the discovery of the metallic block, the team pushed their search outward, mapping the seabed around the Titanic in finer detail than ever before. Each new scan revealed subtle shifts in the terrain, as if the ocean floor itself had been disturbed. Then, during one late-night descent near the ship's stern, the sonar returned something unexpected: a void, rectangular and sharply defined, hidden beneath a collapsed section of steel. At first, they assumed it was just another cavity formed by decay, but as the submersible moved closer and the imaging cleared, the outline came into focus. It wasn't a cavity at all. It was a room, an enclosed compartment buried within the wreck, sealed off from the rest of the ship. The door was warped but still recognizable, and on its corroded frame glimmered a faint trace of red wax. That detail stopped everyone cold. Wax seals aboard the Titanic were used only for restricted cargo valuables, confidential materials, or official records meant for the captain's custody. Yet somehow, after more than a century in near-freezing saltwater, the imprint had endured with deliberate precision. The crew extended the submersible's manipulator arm. The latch gave way with a brittle snap, releasing a slow bloom of silt that drifted through the floodlights like smoke. when the clouds settled. A small chamber emerged cluttered with collapsed crates, fragments of wood, and the ghostly outlines of luggage long dissolved by time. One object, however, remained. A dark brown leather suitcase, remarkably intact, leaning against a fractured bulkhead. The robotic arm lifted it gently, scanning for structural weakness. As the laser passed over the brass clasp, a symbol appeared, two intersecting lines forming a circle. The pattern resembled the emblem of the Freemasons. Back on the mothership. The suitcase was opened in a sealed containment bay. Inside were bundles of aged papers, small brass instruments, and a weathered notebook bound in leather. But folded carefully among them was something far stranger, a map. Its parchment was brittle. The ink faded. The writing in a script no one could identify. The coordinates it displayed pointed not to the Atlantic, but to the heart of a desert thousands of miles away. A single, chilling word had been written along its edge, Egypt, hours after recovering the leather suitcase. The artifact lay sealed in a sterile bay aboard the research vessel, its contents spread carefully across the table under white light. Among the water-worn documents, one item drew every eye, a folded sheet of parchment that seemed older than everything around it. When the team transmitted high-resolution scans to a lab on shore, the results came back impossible to reconcile. The material wasn't paper at all, but animal hide, its age estimated at more than 3 centuries before the Titanic ever sailed. The writing across its surface defied simple classification, a fusion of early hieroglyphs and unfamiliar astronomical symbols etched with microscopic precision. At the center of the map stood a vast triangular figure surrounded by spiraling lines that radiated outward like waves of energy. In one corner, a faint insignia came into view, the seal of the Great Library of Alexandria, if genuine. The map might reference a site concealed when the library burned a vault of knowledge the ancients meant to keep from falling into the wrong hands. Then a technician enhanced the eastern margin of the image, revealing a barely legible line of text, Chamber of Osiris. The name rippled through the room. Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. The ruler who was said to have been dismembered and scattered across Egypt. To archaeologists, it was mythology. To the team staring at that map, it suddenly felt like a directive. If the coordinates were real, they pointed not to legend, but to a physical place buried beneath the desert. Yet one question overshadowed every revelation. How had a relic connected to ancient Egypt found its way onto a luxury liner that sank in 1912? Inside the same case lay a small journal, its final page written in hurried strokes. They don't want us to know the truth, but it must be brought to light before it's buried again beneath the ocean. There was no signature, no date, only a single seal pressed into the final page, the image of an eye within a pyramid. In the hours after the map's translation, attention shifted to a single question: who had carried it aboard the Titanic? Cross-referencing the passenger manifest led the team to one name that refused to fit the pattern: William Thomas Stead, a British journalist and spiritualist famous in his day for writing about the unseen. Stead had spent years chasing stories of ancient Egypt, secret brotherhoods, and life after death. He was also known for his ties to several clandestine societies in Europe, groups that believed fragments of lost wisdom had survived from pharaonic times. The deeper the researchers dug, the stranger the trail became. Just 2 years before his final voyage, Stead had visited Egypt under the sponsorship of a private benefactor. Unverified notes from that trip mentioned a sealed document wrapped in linen and stamped with wax, an artifact said to have been recovered from an unrecorded excavation near Giza. If genuine, it matched the age, material, and seal of the map now lying in their lab. Even more unsettling was Stead's reputation as a prophet. Before boarding the Titanic in 1912, he told a London newspaper that a great ship will meet its fate upon the sea. At the time, readers took it for symbolism. 2 days later, it became a tragedy. Historians once dismissed the legend of a cursed mummy said to have traveled aboard the ship, but the discovery of the Osiris map had revived old suspicions. Perhaps the curse was never about superstition at all, but about knowledge that was never meant to surface again. As the team expanded their scans around the wreck, another anomaly appeared, dense, metallic, and strangely regular in shape, buried deep beneath the silt near the cargo hold. The submersible inched forward, floodlights slicing through the murk. Through the haze, a form emerged, massive, rectangular, carved from a single block of stone. The cameras adjusted focus, and every breath in the control room seemed to stop. It was a sarcophagus unmistakably Egyptian in design, its granite surface still etched with hieroglyphs of the Old Kingdom, and there it lay, beside the Titanic, waiting as if the past itself had followed the ship into the depths. The cameras inched closer to the massive stone shape lying beside the Titanic. At first it seemed like just another block of debris, but as the sediment drifted away under the submersible's thrusters, its true outline came into view: a coffin, tilted in the sand, its lid cracked yet still sealed against the deep. Along its surface ran a lattice of carvings, not pure hieroglyphs, but a fusion of astronomical glyphs and precise geometric lines, patterns that seemed to map the heavens, and though it had rested here for more than a century. The stone shimmered faintly under the lights, giving off a slow, pulsing glow, soft blue against the black water. The crew initiated a full 3D scan. Moments later, the materials analyst leaned forward, frowning. The spectral data made no sense. The crystalline structure didn't match any known granite. Its silica ratios and trace elements were unlike anything naturally occurring on Earth. It looked manufactured, not carved. The sub's camera probed the fracture along the lid. Through the thin veil of silt, a shape began to emerge inside humanoid, motionless. The body was encased in a translucent material, clear as glass, and the light revealed features too strange to dismiss as human: an elongated skull, narrow face, and high-bridged nose, elegant, unfamiliar, almost sculpted. No one spoke until a quiet voice finally broke the silence. "That's not Egyptian. Maybe not even human." Thermal sensors registered a faint energy signature emanating from within the figure, weak, but constant, like a heartbeat measured in centuries. Plans formed instantly retrieve the coffin, secure it for analysis. Then the instruments went haywire. Pressure gauges spiked, magnetic fields fluctuated, and an electric hum filled the cabin. Without warning, a surge erupted from the sarcophagus, a burst of electromagnetic energy that knocked out every system on the sub. For several seconds, there was nothing. No sound, no light. When power flickered back, the cameras revealed the impossible. The coffin had moved, only a few centimeters, but enough to leave a perfect outline in the sand where it had been. The mission leader's voice finally cut through the static. Ascend. Now, as the submersible rose toward the surface, its rear camera caught one last image: the cracked lid of the coffin, glowing softly in the dark, as if something inside had just awakened. By the time the submersible reached a safe distance, the crew had already begun dissecting the readings from their encounter with the coffin. The first irregularity appeared in the magnetic logs, a rhythmic fluctuation repeating with uncanny precision, steady as a heartbeat. The pulses radiated outward in spirals that mirrored the carvings on the lid itself, as though the stone and the energy were following the same design. At first, the scientists blamed interference, but when the hydrophones came online, another layer emerged: a low vibration rolling through the water, too patterned to be geological noise. The sound rose and fell with deliberate cadence, almost musical. Someone whispered that it sounded like a voice trying to form words across miles of ocean. When the acoustic data was filtered, the results sent a ripple of disbelief through the control deck. The frequency matched archived recordings of unexplained underwater signals captured decades earlier near the Bermuda Triangle. The match was exact down to the decimal. One technician tried to rationalize it. "Probably natural resonance," he said, though his voice shook. The mission leader only pointed at the monitor. The pulse repeated every 11 minutes and 34 seconds, the timing too perfect to be chance. They decided to respond. A single sonar ping, a controlled pulse, a greeting cast into the dark. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then the instruments flickered. A return signal appeared, identical frequency. Perfect alignment, but inverted, as if the deep were answering in the mirror. For a long moment, no one spoke. The possibility of an undared voice hung heavy. Maybe the coffin hadn't been a relic at all, but a containment. The commander ordered a full communications lockdown. Coordinates were encrypted. Data streamed to a secure facility in Norway. Yet, hours later, the audio archives vanished from the ship's servers, erased without trace. Near midnight, the second ROV descended to resume the survey. Its feed lasted only seconds, a brief bloom of blue light expanding through the dark, the static of a rising hum, and then the screen went black. The feed from the second ROV ended in static, and then nothing, for several minutes. The control deck sat frozen, waiting for the signal to return. It never did. Within hours, the entire operation around the Titanic was ordered to stand down. An internal report was filed, encrypted, and sent to headquarters. Before dawn, a directive arrived from higher command. All data relating to the stone coffin and the anomalous signal was to be sealed under emergency classification. No one aboard the vessel was permitted to speak publicly. Every recording, log, and sonar file was copied, locked, and removed from the ship's systems. A week later, the public explanation came simple, sterile, and untrue. A technical malfunction, they said, had caused the loss of the submersible. No mention of the signal, no mention of the light. The few seconds of footage showing the blue radiance beneath the wreck were edited beyond recognition, then quietly erased from every archive. Those who had been there understood what silence meant. After returning to land, several crew members received formal notices from federal agencies, reminders of their obligation to national security. No one dared to defy them. Months later, an anonymous post surfaced on an encrypted network. It was brief, unsigned, and swiftly deleted, but not before it spread. The object we found doesn't belong to the Titanic or to Earth. The leak claimed the blackout began after naval energy specialists compared the pulse frequency and discovered a match, the same pattern detected in 1997 near Antarctica, once believed to emanate from deep within the planet itself. From that moment, the Titanic site was reclassified as a restricted research zone. Civilian dives were suspended, archaeological permits revoked. No expedition has been allowed near the coordinates since. One oceanographer, speaking years later under anonymity, offered the only reflection anyone would ever hear. We didn't just uncover history. We brushed against something history was built to hide. Since then, the Titanic has ceased to be only a monument to loss. It has become a boundary between what humanity remembers and what the deep has chosen to keep. But what if that boundary isn't the end, but the beginning of a story we were never meant to find? Do you think the ocean is protecting a secret or guarding a warning? Share your theory below, because somewhere beneath the waves, the story isn't over.